Welcome to our webinar titled DNA Basics. The objective of this webinar is to provide fundamental knowledge of how DNA is used for relationship testing. The accreditation needed for legal testing, first and foremost, every laboratory doing legal relationship tests in the U.S. needs to be AABB accredited. We also maintain the ISO 17025 accreditation for legal international testing, and we also have the A2LA accreditation. 50-50, everyone receives half of their DNA from their mother, and everyone receives the other half of their DNA from their father. It doesn't make any difference what nationality, race, sex you are. Everyone receives half from mother, half from father. There are different DNA tests that can be performed. The majority of what we do is paternity testing, which is to determine whether or not the father is the actual father of a child. However, we can also do maternity testing, and this is to determine if the mother is the mother of the child. People ask, why would you ever want to do maternity testing? We always know who the mother is. Well, not necessarily so. We do a lot of maternity testing for the U.S. government for immigration testing, where the State Department or USCIS requires that the mother prove that she's the mother of the child prior to allowing her to bring the child over to the U.S. Also, in adoption situations where someone was adopted and they think they may have found their long-lost mother, we can test to see if she is the mother. We've had numerous times where people have called us that have gotten a DNA ancestry test done, and the ancestry company has determined that they may share a DNA with another member of the family, and we may have done several maternity tests to prove whether or not the mother is actually the mother of the child. No matter what test you do, always keep in mind you want to include the mother. That doesn't make any difference what test. Even if it's a paternity or any other test, include the mother. It will always improve the results of the test. If the mother or if the father is not available, we have numerous options for testing. So we can test the grandparents. Now keep in mind, if the father's not available, we always want to test the paternal side or the father's side, which would be his parents. That's considered the paternal side. So we would test the grandmother or the grandfather, which would have been the father or mother of the deceased or the father that's not available. We can test aunts and uncles. This is called an avuncular test. And again, it needs to be a brother or sister of the father, which would be an aunt or an uncle of the child. We can do siblingship tests where we test brothers and sisters to see if they came from the same mother or came from the same father or came from both the same mother and father. Again, always include the mothers, especially in relationship tests. You'll find that that will always improve the results, especially in relationship tests. There are legal and non-legal tests. Well, all relationship tests can be legal, which are considered court admissible, or non-legal. A lot of people call non-legal tests informational, private, or peace of mind tests. What's the difference in the two? Well, the collection method and whether or not chain of custody was maintained throughout the process determines if a test can be either legal or not. Non-legal versus legal. Well, if you're doing a non-legal test, no matter if it's paternity or relationship tests, you do not need to identify the individual through their government-issued photo ID. You do not need to take photos. It is not required to get consent signatures. However, we highly recommend that anytime you're doing DNA testing on anything, you should always get consent signatures. Not required to put the date of the collection, nor the collection location. And you do not need to maintain chain of custody. That means for a non-legal case, you could literally hand an individual a DNA kit. They could take it home. They could collect themselves, collect the child, and then send it into the laboratory or bring it back into you, and you can ship it to the laboratory. So there's no chain of custody. For legal cases, this is not the case. You need to identify each individual through their government-issued photo ID, and it's very important that you double-check that to make for sure that the ID is not expired. It needs to be valid. You need to take a photo of each individual that you are collecting. Any individual that's in a DNA test for a legal test, you need to take a photo of those individuals. And you definitely need to get consent signatures. For the child, if the child is underage, then you need a guardian or parent assigned for the child. We require the date of the collection, the location of the collection, and you need to maintain chain of custody at all times. This means that if you're going to walk out of the room during a collection, you need to remove the swabs, the sample envelopes, the chain of custody, the entire DNA kit before you walk out of the room, because you need to maintain what's called chain of custody. Legal relationship tests, well, again, you must have, or they must have, a government-issued photo ID. These consist of a driver's license, a passport, a green card, any of these. These are all government-issued. A photo Costco card or a photo credit card is not acceptable. It needs to be a government-issued photo ID. And keep in mind, it must not be expired. It has to be a valid ID. I want to cover with you what the samples, the standard samples for DNA testing are. Buccal swabs is what we see the most of. These are cheek swabs. They're actually they resemble a Q-tip that's about 6 inches long, and it has a cotton swab on one end of them. Buccal swabs are used most commonly, and they are as accurate as blood, but a lot less painful. You don't have to prick a finger or draw any blood for a DNA test. Also, a standard sample is an FTA card, which is a lot of people call blood cards. This consists of a card that actually has several circles on it with preservatives in the circles, where when you put a drop of blood in the circle, it actually preserves it. It's the easiest way to store and ship blood. A person's DNA is the same on a cheek swab as it is a blood sample, so keep that in mind. You always want to do buccal swabs whenever possible. Some examples of non-standard samples are gum, toothbrush, hairbrush, fingernail clippings, clothing, bone, sheets, pillowcases, teeth, earwax, cigarette butts, tissue, jewelry, hair, or even condoms. Now, all of these items are non-standard samples and can only be used for non-legal tests unless chain of custody has been maintained. By that I mean if we were to receive a tooth from a medical examiner who extracted a tooth from a deceased individual, and we have total chain of custody, meaning everything is documented of who removed the tooth, who identified the body, the time it was done, the date, so on and so forth, and they've maintained chain of custody, then it can be a legal case. But for the most part, if someone brings in a toothbrush, gum, or hairbrush or something like that to you, there's no chain of custody. So it cannot be a legal case. We get asked all the time, what is a duo, what is a trio? Well, very simply, a duo is a child and alleged father, and a trio is a child, alleged father, and the mother. Keep in mind that an additional father or an additional child is not a trio. That's an additional person, and you want to charge accordingly for your tests. A trio is a mother, father, and child. Results reporting, well, a paternity test will state the alleged father cannot be excluded or is excluded as the biological father. Well, what does this mean? Well, cannot be excluded means essentially he's the father. So picture 10 men lined up and you go to the first one, you're excluded, the second one, you're excluded, the third one, you're excluded. All the way down the list, you get to the last individual and you say you cannot be excluded. That means he's the father of the child. If the report said he is excluded, this means he's excluded as the biological father, so he is not the father. What are markers or loci? Well, we test 24 markers or loci. Markers or loci are locations on a chromosome. We test these same locations for each person that we test. That's how we determine, because we compare each one to each other's. So if we're comparing a loci at one particular spot for the father, we need to test that same spot for the child. The number of matches determines their probability of relatedness. So again, if we test 24 markers and we have 24 matches, then the chances that their relatedness is going to be somewhere in the 99.99999% chance. Well, you will never see 100% because we'd have to test every man on earth in order to determine that, and obviously that's not possible. If we see a 0% probability, that means there's a 0 chance that they are related. Paternity and maternity inconclusive results range from 0.01% all the way up to 98.9%. So anything in that range would be considered an inconclusive result. For relationship testing, such as grandparentage, avuncular, or siblingship, inconclusive results range from 9.09% all the way up to 90.9%. What are alleles? You'll hear this name thrown around the office every now and then. An allele is a form of a gene found on a chromosome. Each person has 2 alleles per loci, or per marker. They receive, just as we stated before, 1 allele from their mother and 1 allele from their father. If the mother has a 12 and a 15 at loci D5S818, she will give either that 12 or that 15 at that same location to her offspring. The same thing holds true for the father. If he has a 12 and a 13 at loci D5S818, he will give either his 12 or his 13 at the same loci D5S818 to his offspring. So it would look like this. As I stated before, you get half your DNA from your mother and half from your father. So the mother at loci D5S818 has a 12 and a 15. As you can see, the father has a 12 and a 13, and the child has a 15 and a 13. Well, that means the child got the 15 from the mother and the 13 from the father. How many markers should be tested? Well, the more the merrier. The more markers tested, the better the results will be. We test 24 loci or 24 markers. Other laboratories test as few as 16, some do 21, and you may find 1 or 2 others that do 24 markers. But we do 24 markers as a standard. What is a COC? You'll hear that acronym quite a bit. Well, a COC stands for chain of custody. This is the form that's used to document absolutely everything. Is the test legal or informational? Where is the location being performed? What type of test is being performed, such as paternity, avuncular, grandparentage? Who's being tested? On this form, you'll provide the names, the relationship to each other being tested, the dates of birth, and we need everyone's race or ethnicity. Also, on that form, you'll need to document who collected them and what date they were collected. Legal cases must have a COC or a chain of custody. What is a DNA kit? Well, a DNA kit is a pre-made kit containing the items needed to perform DNA collections on several individuals. A typical DNA kit contains a COC, chain of custody, buccal swabs for normally collecting 3 to 4 individuals, sample envelopes, usually 3 or 4 of these, to retain the swabs after the DNA has been collected from each individual, and each individual's swabs need to go in their own separate envelope. And then also, normally there's a courier envelope with a return waybill back to the laboratory. So once you've completed the collection, taken the photos and everything, you would package everything up into the courier envelope, such as the UPS or FedEx or DHL, and you would attach the waybill and give it to the courier for return to the lab. Does a DNA kit expire? Well, not really. DNA kits are good for years and years and can be, as long as they're stored in a secure, cool, dry environment. The swabs do have an expiration date on it, so if you've had a kit sitting around for many, many years, you may want to take a look for that expiration date. And if in doubt, throw the swabs out and get some other swabs. I want to make you aware that you have numerous webinars available to you. These consist of AABB Collector Certification webinar, the MediPro Direct Portal instructions for the admin, the MediPro Direct Portal instructions for staff. We also have a relationship test webinar which covers grandparentage, avuncular, twin zygosity, and siblingship testing. There's a webinar on infidelity and human identity match. And coming soon, we're going to have a new webinar on customer service. We encourage you to take advantage of all of these webinars. They're put there for you. I want to thank everyone for attending. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call. Our phone number is 800-890-5722. Or by all means, if email is the best way, you can contact us at support@alliancedna.com. Thank you very much for attending.